Welcome back to another episode of the Awaken podcast. On this episode, we're going to share how you can navigate times of chaos, uncertainty, change, and unpredictability from a place of power. We're going to share a concept called self-sourcing. We're going to look at ways that you can become more resilient and find nervous system regulation when things are not going to plan. So over the last few weeks, Lukis and I have been navigating some pretty intense, unpredictable times. We are residents of Los Angeles and the fires have been really just down the road from us. So we've been out of LA, we've been dealing with it all, we've been facing losing everything, and it's brought up a lot. These are opportunities for us to review what really matters and dig deep into our toolkits to navigate life in a more empowered way. And whether you relate to this specific experience that we've had or not, there are universal life lessons within this episode that can benefit every single one of us and make you a more strong, wise, emotionally intelligent, and resilient human. So let's dive into it. And I want to say thank you so much for being here. If you're a subscriber, we really appreciate you. If you share these episodes with your community, with friends, and with family, thank you so much. It's community that gets the word out there, and this is what gives us an expression and a platform for us to live purposeful lives. We love nothing more than inspiring you and supporting you. So let's get into it. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the Awaken podcast,
where we share practical spirituality for modern living.
Join us as we dive deep into conversations about healing and transformation.
Let's go. We're back.
We are back. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yep.
I'm excited. If you have a cacao or a matcha or a little tea.
We've got a tea tonight.
Yep, we're doing herbal tea, evening vibes.
You know how we do it.
Let's take a moment, take a breath.
Closing down your eyes and taking a nice deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth.
Setting our intention for the conversation. What's your intention?
My intention is to remind people that they are creators. And no matter what chaos and uncertainty that's going on in their external environment around them, that they have the power to shift and pivot and create and mobilize energy and take action and move in a way where they don't feel like a victim, but they actually feel like an empowered creator. So that's what I want to speak into.
Cheers to that.
What's your intention?
I'll take a little sip to that.
Yum, this
The
tea's
tea's
good.
good.
So good.
Calm Buddha tea. We're feeling it.
Let's go.
Okay. My intention is to share humble reminders of what matters. Yeah, I think it's a big conversation and it's an important one, no matter whether people can relate directly to what we're going to talk about or not. These are universal themes.
Yeah, let's speak into the universal themes.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So you would have all known by now there's been huge, devastating fires in LA that have wiped out over 10,000 homes, and it's been super wild. This is something that LA has never experienced on this level before. It's been catastrophic. We've had friends that have lost homes, and there's been so many people that have been displaced and have really been going through it in a huge way. So if you're listening to this, you or your family members have been directly impacted by the fires, we just want to send you some love and say a massive shout out to you. We know it's been full on, such a hectic time here in LA. So our heart goes out to every single one that's been affected by the fires. Hella and I live in LA. We're a suburb away from where the fires were. So the fires impacted us.
And they impacted multiple areas.
Yep.
But one of them, which is the Pacific Palisades, is the suburb over.
Yeah. And we're sitting right here, blessed and we have a lot of gratitude because our house made it. So we didn't lose everything, spoiler alert. But there was a moment in time where it came close, and we were also navigating a lot of uncertainty over the last 3 weeks. We've been out of this house for the last 3 weeks. So let's get into our story. Let's share our experience and then zoom out and share some universal lessons that I think that will be helpful for anyone navigating change and uncertainty.
For sure. Okay, I guess I can explain it. So I'm going to try my best to summarize here and give some of the juicy details along the way, bit of balance. Basically, what happened is there was a notification that we received before the fires. This was a few days prior, that there was going to be these Santa Ana winds coming.
And they've come before for context. And we usually, when they come around this neighborhood, the power company will shut off power for safety to prevent fires.
So we received an email from the power company saying there would be power outages. And we've spoken about this on the podcast before. Even just living in a house where there are regular power outages is something that we're not used to. And it's super disruptive when you have a business that runs and relies on technology to function.
Yeah, we work from home. This podcast studio is in our house. So.
Exactly. So we've been learning to navigate that. And a few days before the wind actually started, we knew that the power was going to go out. And so we took some time one morning, this was a few days prior, like I said, to tune in to get guidance about how we should approach it. And again, for context, one of the ways that we've learned to approach it is through deep surrender. And that sometimes looks like, okay, we're not going to work. We're going to go deep on our practices. We're going to meditate. We're going to get still. We're going to fast. Like there could be different ways that we could handle it. Another way is, okay, let's go and book an Airbnb.
Well, you're talking specifically about when there's a power outage.
Yes.
So at that point in time, we didn't know that there was going to be fires.
And we were just navigating that level of the hurdle.
So our guidance that Hala was tuning into that morning was, should we stay in this period of time with no power and just surrender to that? And like Hala said, go within, use it to deepen our connection to our practices. Or should we mobilize energy, book an Airbnb, and just carry on working? And that's what we decided to do.
Yeah. And to add another layer to this, when I tuned in that morning, the message that I got from my guides was, this is going to be different. Pack and leave like you're evacuating.
Yeah. And I was super resistant to that, because it was really inconvenient to pack up all our valuable things and take them to this Airbnb. Would have been a huge undertaking and a massive process. So straight away, I was super resistant to it and basically just ignored the guidance.
And I was 50-50. I was like, I think we should listen. And I remember we actually came into the podcast studio. We sat down on the floor together. We looked around at all the cameras and all of the equipment. And we were like, oh, this is going to be such a hassle to unplug everything, pull it all apart. Like, we've got everything in certain settings. It's a whole situation. And I was like, well, I feel like we should, like we got guided to. And then the conclusion that we came to was, let's go to our Airbnb. And from there, if it gets worse, like if the situation does get serious, we can come back because we're getting an Airbnb in LA. So no worries, we'll come back and we can pack up and evacuate from there. That was a mistake. That was a rookie move. Yeah, clearly shows we've never had a situation like this before.
First rookie move was ignoring the guidance.
Yes.
And to be clear, the guidance wasn't coming from fear. There was no fear whatsoever. It was just a direct stream of consciousness, a message saying you should pack up your stuff like you're evacuating.
And I had no personal attachment to wanting to do that.
No.
So it felt very clear that it wasn't like paranoia or fear. It was like, no, the flavor of this is very different.
Yeah, and little did we know that it was going to be very different.
Yeah.
So that would start happening over the next 12 hours that the fires would ignite. And we had moved to an Airbnb in Hollywood Hills, which at that point in time was quite far away from where the fires had started.
Right. We went from being in the hills to being in a really dense, populated urban area and assuming that all would be well. Fast forward. So we are at the Airbnb, we're settling in, and we're planning this big work day for the following day, kind of having no idea what is about to unfold. So we woke up the following morning at the Airbnb and the power was out. And we didn't know whether it would be an hour or 3 hours or multiple days. We were completely in the unknown. And the whole reason we went to the Airbnb was to have power. So we were again invited to surrender and tune in to our next steps. You and I did a meditation and we did breath work, and we were like, okay, what is the next thing to do? You received the guidance that we should go to Phoenix. But we were feeling, so we spoke about it after the meditation, and it was like, okay, well, we could book a flight for the morning and go.
So let's just stay here the night, even though it's got no power, we can't work.
Yeah.
We'll just sleep on it and we'll head to the
Start
airport
fresh tomorrow.
in the morning.
Yeah. So then a few hours later, we went into another meditation.
Well, yeah, we didn't have much to do.
We're like, okay, breath work, let's go.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I received another super clear message, and it was from my guides, and it said, do not take for granted the window that you have open to leave tonight that may not be there in the morning. And suddenly this wave of urgency came over me. I came out of my meditation and I said to you, we need to leave tonight and we need to pack now.
Well, at that same time, I was hearing fire engines and helicopters. But again, I didn't think too much of it because that's LA. It's happening all the time. But they didn't stop. They just kept coming. So it started to feel different. And after you said that, I remember going outside on the rooftop to have a look.
And at this stage, I was already like frantically packing our bags.
Yeah, so there's no power in the house. It's completely dark. I go on the rooftop and the sky is red and there's smoke and fire just over here. I can see it. And there's fire engines and helicopters heading up to the hill. And at that point, I was like, it's real. Like, this is different. And I remember coming back inside and our phone started beeping and the alarm started going off. There was a level 3 evacuation, which is basically get out now, evacuate. So that was us. We were packing up our stuff in the dark. We couldn't really see.
Yeah, I had my phone torch, you had yours. And within a few minutes, we had gotten everything together in the dark. We did leave some things behind now, I know, but we did our best. We ordered an Uber and we had no flight booked and we just went to LAX. And in the Uber on the way there, I found a flight that night, thankfully. And I'm just so glad that flights were even running because with that weather, I thought that flights would be cancelled. Anyway, we got on the flight, we went to Phoenix, and we had no idea how long we would be there. So we booked an Airbnb for a few days.
Yeah, well, we did think that it would only be a few days, but we didn't actually know. But we thought the power would come back on in our area in a few days once the winds had settled and they would be able to get the fires under control.
Like they usually do.
Yeah. But again, this was different. The fires kept spreading. They weren't able to contain them. The winds started picking up more and the fires kept spreading and it got really bad.
Yeah. So at this point, to be real with you all, there was definitely adrenaline. The stress response was activated. This was not chill. It was super intense. And I think that both of us are very good at handling high pressure, stressful situations. And we understand through all of the work that we do exactly how the stress response works in the body. You know, that fight or flight intelligence, it's there for a purpose, and it was present for sure. And what I am so grateful for is this understanding, because once we got to Phoenix, I could tell that my body was feeling so tense from having to do all of that and not knowing what was going on, and having friends who were going through really serious crisis situations. And I needed to come home to a place within myself and access some level of safety in order to regulate. And this is the work that we do, right? This is where it gets real. This is not just like la-di-da, nice to do, like, oh, I'm doing nervous system regulation because it's trendy. No. When you go through highly stressful experiences, being able to regulate your stress response and reestablish safety within your body, mind system can make the biggest difference in the days and weeks, months, and even years that follow.
Totally.
Because these are individual and collective traumas. Like the amount of trauma that has come out of this whole experience for people in LA, not us, thankfully, but a lot of people in LA are facing serious trauma right now. And these skills can be like that make or breaker to turn it around.
Yeah. So I'll carry on with the story.
Tell.
We got to Phoenix and we grounded, and that was great. But there was still so many uncertainties, like the fires were spreading and we didn't know if our house would be safe or not. I remember we rang Heidi, our assistant, and we were like, would you be willing to go to our house and get some essential things?
That was so bad. Like, I felt so bad doing that.
I didn't.
And it
I was so grateful that we had Heidi and she was willing.
Thank you, Heidi. We
Shout
love
out
you.
to Heidi.
So I think we should tell the story of this, because I remember like facing very real. You and I had full, serious heart-to-heart conversations. We're like, okay, if the house burns down,
and we lose
everything, is there anything that we would want to tell our past selves before it happened to do, like to prepare? Is there anything that you wish you would have grabbed?
Yeah. And from my perspective, it would have been a really unfortunate thing to lose everything that we've worked so hard for. But at the same time, I know that all of these material things that we have are ultimately impermanent, and you can't take them with you when you go. So from my perspective, I was willing to surrender everything. And the only things that I felt that I wasn't willing to surrender was the equipment in here, the cameras, the things that we use to serve, to create these podcasts and to like speak and to create an impact and give value. Because I knew if we lost everything and we had this equipment, we could continue making content. We could continue being of service and step into using our voice and sharing our, authentic gifts as we do. And that was what I asked Heidi to get. I was like, Heidi, can you please pack up the camera equipment?
Yeah. That was the main priority. And seriously, to have to ask your team member to drive into a fire zone where there are only fire trucks on the highways at that point. Like she said that the highways were empty and it was just fire trucks everywhere. And she's driving in the night out to our house in the hills and having to go with a flashlight and this big like house that had no power. It would have been so creepy. And I was like, thank you. I was just so grateful. And it felt so real. Like she managed to get on FaceTime and she's in the dark and she's literally like, what do you want me to save? because this could be it. That was when it got so real for me to have her, even like she had the torch and she was going through our bedroom and our closet and like our drawers and being like, I don't know where that thing is. Like, don't worry. I guess I just have to leave it. Like little keepsakes, a special necklace, things like that, where I'm like, I am so underprepared. I don't even know where it is.
One thing that I was really proud of myself about was it really showed me all the work that we've been doing, because I got to such a place of surrender and non-attachment to anything that I have. And we have some really beautiful things that mean a lot to us, but there was just full surrender, full detachment from the material realm.
Yeah.
Whatever is going to be, and I have no control over it. So I surrender. And in that present moment, honestly, I felt really liberated. I felt a sense of freedom. There was no stress. There was no anxiety. There was no worry. I felt completely free with whatever was going to happen, either way. And that was something that I was really proud of, because the old me wouldn't have been in that state of mind. That old me would have been freaking out, super dysregulated, overwhelmed, anxious, totally stressing out. But I stayed in that state for like 3 weeks straight. The stress didn't affect me. I didn't feel it. I felt sorry and I felt really empathetic for other people that were losing everything and how destructive it was. Like I had a lot of empathy, especially for our neighbors. I didn't want, more than me, I didn't want our neighbors to be impacted because they're elderly and most of them have experienced losing their homes before in this area in 2018 in previous fires. And I didn't want them to go through that again.
Me too.
So there was a lot of empathy for them. But for me on a personal level, there was just total surrender, which I was really grateful for.
That was a beautiful experience to have, and it is something that I'm grateful for as well. I remember we were in the Airbnb in the kitchen, and we had this moment where we talked through that. Like, we will be okay.
I knew we would be okay because we're creators. Even if we had lost everything, and for us, our insurance company wouldn't have paid things out, and everything
like so
would have
many
been
others
gone,
right now. Yeah.
we would be okay. We would be okay because we're creators. We can rebuild. We can start again. We're resilient. Nothing can really be taken away from us because the skill set and the things that we've learned to create the life that we have is something that will never leave us. So while the material things could be taken away, everything that we've learned and developed over, our relationship, 18 years plus, we could start again. We would rebuild. And honestly, we would flip the script and turn it into something great. We would show people what it means to be resilient. We would show people what it means to rebuild and start again. And we would document the whole process and talk about our learning and what we were going through. We would turn it into lessons and we would pass it on. So I knew deep down, no matter what happened, we would be good. And I was fully surrendered in that.
It was interesting to sit with the different facets of it too. I remember a couple of things that were really pivotal for me. One was I had this moment where I actually started laughing and I was like, the future me would probably donate everything that I own right now anyway and eventually move on to some new expanded version. So can I sit in the seat of my future self who has relinquished everything already by choice? Because when you sit in the mentality of like, this happened to me, I'm a victim, it feels like something was taken, right? Like you were robbed of the right to say goodbye. And I think that's why grief hits people so hard when, let's say, loved ones pass away or something catastrophic and unexpected happens. It's like, there's a lack of closure that can feel so jarring because you didn't get to have the say in how it happened.
Yeah.
And to sit in that sort of scene, I suppose, and play it all out, like, what if you just chose this? And you could own that it was all your own doing. Then how would you feel? And that felt really healing and releasing for me to just be like, oh, It's all coming and going. It's all arising and passing. It's all impermanent. And that was the other pivotal thing that came through one day when I was meditating, is that analogy of the ocean and how Source, God, is providing us with these life experiences, not so that we can remain stuck to one. Like, you don't ride one wave and then attach yourself to it and end there. Everything is coming and going, and it's oscillating in its expressions, and it's changing all the time. And I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking that our identity is found in a thing that we've created, or our security, or our peak. Like, this is it for me. And
a lot of people find their identity in the external world. So like you said, it might be a relationship, it might be a community, it might be a house, it might be some material object that they own. But ultimately, all of that is illusory and it's impermanent, and you can't take it with you.
Yeah, and what I got from that ocean analogy was sometimes what you think is your peak is only the beginning. It's only like a limited version of what you're capable of experiencing and creating and having. And even tragedy and loss can become a rebirth into something really unexpected. And that was when I started to even tap into like, okay, full surrender. And you and I both accessed this and we talked about it. Like, what about when you're that powerful that you turn it into being excited? Anyway, this whole exploration has given me the opportunity to sit with the full spectrum of emotions, from fear to grief to numbness to confusion to frustration to excitement to peace, surrender, the whole gamut. And I am so grateful, not only for obviously the things like safety and for us to be okay and having our studio intact and all those basic things, but for the lessons that we were able to gather through the uncertain time. And I feel like this was just one of so many experiences that you and I have been through in our lives that are relatable and that people go through in so many different shapes and forms, from losing someone to having a disaster strike to having something not work out the way they planned, or feeling like they're not in control and having to pivot. And life is forever changing. And so many of us can trick ourselves into thinking that it's going to stay the same. And if it all stays the same, then we'll be happy, we'll be in control, all will be well. And that's not how nature works. Like, if you aren't initiating change from within, change is coming. And I think that one of the best things that we can do is make peace with that fact and learn to work with the forces of change in a more harmonized and empowered way. Does that mean it's going to be easy? No. But is there a way to make it easier? Yes.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's zoom out for anyone experiencing change in any area of your life, whether it's in your career, whether it's financial, whether it's relationship, whether it's changing city locations, losing a loved one, family members moving in with you or moving out. There's so many ways that life is constantly changing for all of us. So the first lesson that I think we took from this is to trust your intuition. Like, listen and mobilize and take action on your intuition. Because if you're receiving insights and clarity and you're not listening and you're not taking action, from the guide's perspective, you're wasting time and you're wasting resources, because you've been given guidance, but you're not acting on it. So therefore, you're wasting time and you're wasting resources. So that was a big lesson for us.
It's also so easy to assume it's not going to happen to you. And, oh, it's probably a bit extreme. I think it's easier to follow intuition when it's low risk. But when it's inconvenient, when it feels risky, when it's more intense,
Yeah.
it's hard to even believe that that's coming through sometimes, where you're like, this is what I'm getting, and that sounds really out there.
And I think about people who are changing their career or ending a relationship or having to have hard conversations. They know what they need to do. There's insights and clarity and information coming through for them, but they haven't actioned it yet. And usually that happens, one, because like you said, it's uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, or there's fear around actually moving forward and mobilizing and taking action on it. So let's speak into that, because a lot of people experience that sense of fear when it comes to change.
Well, one of the feelings that I've had with these types of intuitive nudges or impulses is I don't want to believe it. And my intuition can kind of butt heads against what I want to believe, my agendas, my attachments, my biases. And I think that if you are going to live life in a more intuitive way, you have to release your own agendas. We talk about this all the time with our students and clients. Intuition does not flow well when you have fixed ideas about how it should be. You really have to get out of the way and let God lead. Like, let that flow come through and get out of the way with it's like when someone's trying to talk and you keep interrupting. The message can't come through clearly. It's not going to be heard. It's not going to land the same way. So first and foremost, I would say, get out of the way with your agendas and get open to whatever is coming through for the highest good.
Yeah. I think about it too when people are experiencing things not working out and they have to make some form of change, stepping into the unknown, it's uncertain. There is a lot of fear that comes up for people. You have to be willing to face off with that fear. And you have to know that you are a creator, because where it can go wrong is where people feel victimized. And when you feel victimized, when you're in a state of mind that you are a victim and life is happening to you and you have no control over what's happening, in that state, you're disempowered. In that state, you can't see possibilities. You're not open, because fear will narrow your awareness. It will narrow your awareness. It won't allow you to see possibilities. So you have to challenge the voice of fear and be willing to face off with it, meaning don't allow it to stop you from moving forward and taking action on your intuition. And it's uncomfortable, because change is uncomfortable. We're stepping into the unknown. And when we step into the unknown, it's unfamiliar. So it can bring up stress. We can go into that sense of survival where we cling on, where we try to hang on to things, even if they're not working out. But if things aren't working out, if they're not meant to be anymore, if change is meant to happen, you have to surrender into that and you have to accept it. And I think that's another big one, is acceptance.
Well, also I'll add that you don't have to, but you get to. And it would be wise to.
That's a good way of reframing it. Yeah, you get to. If you don't, though, it does become uncomfortable, unbearable, painful. It collapses, and ultimately it's taken away from you.
For sure. One of the concepts that I find helpful is to work on what's called your refractory period, right? So when it comes to emotional reactions and self-regulation, there is this refractory period, or it's like the gap between what happens and you responding and integrating the lesson in an empowered way. And earlier on in my journey, I know that my refractory period, where I could get it and be like, okay, that was difficult, took the lesson, got it, I'm good.
Can you give us an example?
That could be weeks. So for example, let's say in the case of having something not go to plan, like I move into this house. I think it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies. And suddenly I find out that every month there are power outages for multiple days. My old response to that could be stewing on it and feeling like a victim for weeks. I keep talking about it, rehashing it, complaining about it, but not really doing anything about it. It's an invitation into a vortex of suffering. My refractory period now is so much faster. And what that looks like is not only witnessing my own pain body, my own reactions and frustration and victim consciousness when it arises, but also preventing it from even occurring. So going, do you know what? I know that if that happens, I'm likely to go into a story. So let's just nip that in the bud altogether and take proactive responsibility and organize an alternative. And for me, what that might look like is booking an Airbnb and being like, I'm not just going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs. I'm going to create a new possibility for myself.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about moving from being a victim to being a creator.
Exactly. And you know, that old me that would complain about it and feel crap and powerless and frustrated and inconvenienced, not only would I feel all of those feelings and wallow in them, I wouldn't create a solution.
Yeah.
Even if I had the resources, even if I had the money to book an Airbnb, because I would be stubborn about my right to feel that and expect that someone else should fix it for me.
Yeah, you feel righteous in your position that you have been wronged, that this isn't fair.
And
that
it's not
something
my
has been-
responsibility to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. So let's unpack this because this is really helpful for the listener. So we're speaking into victimhood consciousness versus creator consciousness. So when you're in victimhood consciousness, you believe that it's not your responsibility. So therefore, you're not going to take responsibility. You're going to blame, you're going to project, you're going to judge. You're just going to outsource your responsibility. And in doing that, you're not actually in your power. You're actually disconnected from your power in that moment. You're definitely not solution oriented. You're in a deficit. You're coming from separation. You're focused on the negative, and that's where your energy and attention's going. So you're not even looking into solutions. You're focusing your energy and attention on what's wrong, and you're not looking into what you can do about it. So the shift of moving from a victim into a creator is taking radical responsibility, knowing that life happens. If there's things that you can't control, you can accept that these things have happened because they've happened. You can't fight against what's happened. Life is happening now. Whatever's happening is happening. Within that, you have choice, and you do have a responsibility to take control of what you can take control of. Not to focus your energy on the things that you can't control, because that would be a waste of time. It would be a waste of energy. It would be a waste of resources.
And a lot of people do that, by the way.
A lot of people get stuck there. But when you step into creator consciousness, you shift your focus to be more solution oriented, of focusing on what you can do, on taking radical responsibility around your choices and realizing that you are the creator of your life. So while you can't control this situation, there's things that you can do to flip the script, to turn it into gold, to make it good, to transmute it. And that's where the shift is. And you have to be willing to do that, because I know that when I've been in victimhood consciousness, I've been really angry at the world. I've been really angry at life, at God, for the things that have happened to me. I don't want to give up my story. I don't want to let go of the story that I've been wronged. And if someone tries to take that story away from me, that I've been wronged, I will defend my limitations.
It feels like an attack, doesn't it, when you're in that state, when you're really attached to a story, a position,
Yep.
of being a victim. that becomes like a safety blanket. And when someone tries to take that away, it's like they're ripping that blanket away.
Yeah, it becomes a part
threatening
of your
survival.
identity in that moment.
Yeah.
So you will defend your limitation. So for me, that looked like getting angry, getting really angry. And like, who are you to say that I'm not a victim? Can anyone relate listening to this conversation? Because when you're in that victimhood mindset, you feel righteous. You feel like you have been wronged. And from your perspective, attached to that story, you're right. But is it serving you to think like that? Is it serving you to be in that state of being is the question. And can you let it go? Can you shift?
And I think with that, the question, can you let it go, could also come, can you try on a different narrative or interpretation?
I like trying it on.
Just
That's
try
a
it
great way.
on.
Yeah.
It's a little less threatening. It's not about what you're going to lose or have taken away. It's an option to just test out if something could be more nurturing and empowering and beneficial. And when I'm in those defensive victim states, trying on a different interpretation is what usually cracks me open to drop it.
Yeah. Okay. And here's the truth. Here is the truth. So from personal experience, when I've been in victimhood consciousness and I've been defending my own limitations, really what's happening is there's parts of me that have been hurt. Like deep down there's hurt, there's pain, and I'm afraid. And can I have compassion for the parts of me that are afraid and the parts of me that are hurt? Yeah, I can. And that's the work, right? If I can meet those parts of me with awareness and love, knowing that I'm afraid, that I'm deep down really hurt, can I hold space for myself to be with those raw emotions that want to be processed? That blame, that resentment, that judgment, that anger that's beneath the surface. There's a lot of sadness and grief usually below that if we allow ourselves to go there.
This is such an important conversation, something that I have not heard anyone talk about ever, is that grief brings up this desire to blame, and it can be so destructive. And whether it be that someone's listening right now who has lost everything in the fires, or someone has recently passed away that you deeply care about, or you're grieving heartbreak, or there's illness in the family, or you're dealing with something that is really challenging. A natural part of grief, right? People talk about the 5 stages of grief, and one of those stages is bargaining, and with that can come trying to find someone to blame. It can be a really destructive force if we don't understand the anger and the raw emotion and energy that's actually underneath that, and we work with it unconsciously instead of consciously. And so I want to give an example of it. One is more recent, right? With the fires, I have seen so many people arguing online, looking for someone to blame. And I'm talking some that are so ridiculous, like even saying, oh, well, people in LA are materialistic and wealthy, and so this is their karma, like, looking to blame and offload responsibility in that way, or, oh, it's political, it's this person's fault, or these people, they didn't do enough, or it's this weather and climate change and blah, blah, blah. Looking for someone to blame, because the raw energy of like, I can't believe this happened and I feel out of control. It's too much for people to be with that sensation and transmute that from within. And so they try to find someone to shoot that energy at. And it's usually not us being our best selves. It can be really unhealthy and a big waste of energy. And another example of it that I want to share, and I've seen this happen so many times, people can become so aggressive when they're grieving death. And it shows up in people fighting about money, inheritance, people's estates, managing people's stuff, even down to things like cause of death. We've experienced this with people who've passed, where it's like, why didn't this happen? They could still be here. We don't want to sit with the pain.
We don't want to accept it.
And so we project.
Yeah.
And having tools to be with your grief can change your life.
Well, accepting it would be really painful. It means that you're going to have to face the emotions that are coming up, and you're going to have to sit with them, which is really challenging for a lot of people. You know, in a society that teaches us to reach outside of ourselves to find temporary relief from what we're feeling inside, and we can all relate to this. We all do it in some form or another, you know, whether it's scrolling on your phone or turning to different coping mechanisms that you might have when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed and beyond your window of tolerance. We all have different ways where we look outside of ourselves to fill a void. We all do it. And for a lot of people, they have really self-destructive coping mechanisms. Like they turn all of their anger inward, and they use substances and alcohol and different things that are actually hurting themselves and hurting other people along the way. And that's their way of coping and numbing and escaping and suppressing things down. So as a society, the only way that we can move through these times of facing change is to self-source. It's to go within. It's knowing that everything you need is ultimately within you, that you have your own connection to a higher power, to source from within, and that you can go within to get what you need, meaning that you can self-soothe, you can regulate your nervous system, you can process stress, you can process your emotions, you can let things go by just closing down your eyes and meeting what's arising in the present moment and being willing to sit with it. And as you sit with it, it shifts.
Earlier, I spoke about the refractory period, and something that I want to just tie in here is when you practice self-sourcing and you learn to sit with your own emotions, one of the things that happens is you collapse that refractory period so that it doesn't even need to come out. Like, I can sit with my rage, my anger, my desire to project and blame.
We weren't taught this as kids. We were taught to outsource how we're feeling. Like, if you look at society right
really
now,
project.
There's so many people that are just using all forms of distraction to keep themselves from feeling. I can think of different ways, like excessive shopping, excessive scrolling, excessive eating, excessive drinking, excessive consumption on any level. It's rampant, and we all do it in different ways. But the remedy is not to outsource, is not to find temporary relief and to fill a void. It's to go within and self-source, to come back home to your connection to a higher power. It happens from within. It's about cultivating a relationship with a higher power, with something so much bigger than you. Ultimately, life is impermanent. Each and every single one of us is here for a short amount of time on this beautiful planet. We can't take material things with us. We each have our own amount of time that we're here. And while we're here, we have an opportunity to bring in more beauty, more joy, more love. But you can't spiritually bypass this. If you are feeling negative emotions or heavy emotions or things like fear or sadness, grief, anger, rage, you can't just skip forward to the positive feelings.
No.
You have to be with what's arising. And as you be with what's arising, then through that, you raise your vibration. But it's not something you can skip over.
Yeah, something that I would love to share with all of the listeners is that when you go through loss, which inevitably every single one of us will experience in one way or another in life, it's very normal to feel like you're not functioning as your normal self. The stress response that comes with the initial shock is just the first stage. And after that, there is a healing process and an adjustment period that is so natural. And I remember when Ari passed away. Ari was a friend of ours. He was a breathwork facilitator and just like an epic human. And he passed away very suddenly. And I remember after he passed, I had the initial shock, confusion, upset, all of that. And then a week went by and 2 weeks went by and it was like 3 weeks, and I remember every single day waking up and being like, damn, this fog, this heavy feeling, it's still here.
Well, it can feel like you're in a nightmare as well. You can feel like you've woken up in a nightmare and it's like, it shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
But it is.
There's the kind of cognitive dissonance, confusion thing going on, and your brain's trying to catch up and make sense of how it got to be the way it is or how that thing happened. So that heavy feeling, I remember just day after day, you and I both had it, and it was like, still feel it, like still feeling low energy, foggy. And, mentally I could say, I'm at peace with Ari passing. I'm connected to his spirit. I feel good about it. But my body was telling a different story. And because we do work with somatics, understanding the mind-body connection, it's so very real. I want more people to understand and normalize that just because you want to be over something or you want to be feeling really positive and complete or like forgiven this thing that happened or not worrying about your material possessions or whatever the thing is, that might not be your body's truth. And the best thing that you can do is be honest about the whole experience that you're having, mind, body, emotions, and energy, and give it space to be. Like, you don't need to escape it or take it away. In fact, the irony of all of this is the more that you try to deny it and kind of suppress it and get away from it and speed your way through it, the longer it lingers. And the more that you actually lean into it and love on it, like embrace it and go, okay, this is normal. I'm allowed to feel this. Not wallowing, there's a difference, but like lovingly giving space for authentic process. It transmutes it. And it transmutes it in a way that's lasting. So you don't have in 10 years this thing come up out of the woodwork that's like, oh, didn't process that. You actually allowed it to complete.
Yeah, you complete the cycle.
How do you feel about that with grief and times of challenge and uncertainty? How do you allow yourself to feel? Because it's one thing to say, let's do that, but it's another thing to be like, well, how? How though?
I surrender into everything that I'm feeling. I didn't used to have that mindset. I used to judge everything. I used to fight against what was happening. I used to feel like a victim, in those situations. But now there's a deep space of surrender that I've accessed, and I just embrace what I'm feeling. So if strong emotions are coming up, like sadness or anger, I allow myself to just be with the raw emotions and just process them, just feel them all the way through to completion. I don't run, I don't numb, I don't suppress. I don't look for something outside of myself anymore. I used to, but I don't do that anymore. So I just meet what's arising in the present moment and I surrender to it. I focus on what I can control and I let go of what I can't control. So I double down on the things that I can personally take radical responsibility on and control. And I let go and surrender the things that are outside my control. And that gives me a sense of purpose within what's happening. And also because of the work that we do, we're deeply connected to spirit. So when someone does pass over, even if it's a sudden death, we are in conversation with their spirit. So we are receiving information on another level that we can incorporate into our awareness and understand and process, which is helpful as well. And I know within myself that even though death is really challenging, there is a celebration of life in that. So it's also pivoting And you're not bypassing the grief, moving through all those layers and then getting to the point where you're celebrating that person's life. And you're also looking for ways that you can allow their legacy to live on, that you can allow them to live on through your action taking and the things that you do in the world. So that's what it is for me. And that gives me a sense of peace.
There's a few things that you said that are interesting. So I think what you're describing with honoring a person's life and still connecting, I also feel that can apply to an experience that we have of, let's say, losing a home and honoring the home that once was, and that was a beautiful chapter of life. And in a way, I look at life as like, even if we own stuff, even if we're married, even if we have all of this sense of permanence and like it's locked in, it's mine, it's all kind of on rent because we're all going to leave eventually.
That's how I treat it. I treat it like life's a ceremony.
Yeah.
And I'm only here for a short amount of time within the ceremony.
And honoring what is within the ceremony can mean accepting that it's impermanent, but loving it for what it was. And just because it's no longer with you doesn't mean that it didn't provide something beautiful for a perfect time. You know, it was as long as it was, and that's okay. So there's that aspect. And then another thing that I want to just touch on here is more of the granular. You spoke about surrendering and allowing yourself to feel and be with it. And when it comes to how to do that, I just wanted to acknowledge that for both of us, that can look like literally going and laying down horizontal on a yoga mat or on the couch or in bed and staring into space and just feeling the damn feelings. It could look like putting on headphones and playing a really emotional playlist and feeling and processing that way. It could look like doing breath work. I mean, that is our primary reason for being so passionate about the work that we do and sharing Awaken breathwork all over the world. It's because your breath can help you to process and access emotions that have been buried so damn deep that need to be felt. And it's like the breath can just get in there, bring it up, organize it all, and then let it all go 100 times more efficiently than you can do on your own. So we rely on breath work, and that's why we do it every day. But there's also the therapeutic work that we do, which is those more intense journeys. And in times of grief, that's what we rely on. Like I can say for both you and I, if we're going through stuff, we're going into an hour of breath work.
Also, because we've done so much somatic work now, we've conditioned our body to process our emotions. So yes, while we do go into a breathwork journey, our bodies know how to let go now. So like you said, it's just we can close down our eyes for a moment. We can connect to those raw sensations and feelings that are inside, and we can tap, we can use our breath, and we can start to process things more rapidly. Where I think before in the past, it would take us a lot longer to do that. And then for some people that have never experienced that before, they don't even have a reference point for that. But that's why we would say, come to one of our events. You know, we're running live events in Los Angeles this year. If you're out in LA and you have things to process, then please come to one of our events. You'll be able to process stress and tension, your emotions, and tap into your own clarity and answers from within. It's just so powerful. And then we also have the Awaken app, which you can access from anywhere in the world. And we have a whole variety of different classes on the app to support you in releasing stress and tension and tapping into your own answers from within. So there's lots of resources out there. And just know that if you're going through it and you are experiencing change right now, and if things do feel uncertain and fears coming up, that you have resources and there's things that you can do. And it's going to come back to self-sourcing rather than outsourcing things, giving away your power and looking for something external to make you feel okay. It's about coming back home to your source.
For sure. A couple of things that I also want to touch on. One is journaling. I have found throughout the time that we've been away with the fires having my journal has been really, really helpful. Being able to write about how I'm feeling and get out any thoughts that have been looping in my mind. It's like a purge. And once you let it out onto the page, it's easier to let it go out of your head because your mind will latch on to things because it doesn't want to forget and release something that might be important. When you put it onto the page, you're giving it a space to land and simultaneously release. And it's a way to self-source, but also talk it out. And I know that as a woman, I know everyone's different, but for me personally, I find that like I love to talk, to process, and self-sourcing is where it's at, right? We want to learn to go within and not come to the outer world from a place of a deficit. Like, I need you to make me feel okay. What we're not saying though is that you're an island and that you should isolate and only rely on yourself. Talking to people is healthy, it's supportive, it's natural. But if you are not doing your practices and you're going straight to relying on someone else to make you feel better and regulate you, that is like putting a Band-Aid over a wound. And when you tend to yourself and then you come into connection with other people, the whole interaction is going to be different. And then the last thing that I want to say on connection is when you're going through hard times, like for example with us with the fires or when Ari passed, what I noticed is that some people can't have a conscious, emotionally intelligent, mature conversation about pain. They don't know how to be with the messy middle parts of human processing. And it's understandable. We've been trained to do this, and we're still learning things all the time about the nuances of being with human experience, right? But one of the things that we can do to self-source more effectively is recognize that you cannot expect someone who is a friend, a family member, has no training at all, to hold safe space for you when you're in the thick of really uncomfortable emotions. And knowing that, be careful, because what can happen is you can bring your raw pain and expect someone to have the exact right wisdom or advice or soothing, supportive presence. And instead, they don't know what to do. They give you something different. They try to fix it. They try to make it go away. They try to tell you, oh, you'll be over it soon. It's all good. Focus on the bright side, whatever. Or they go into complaining with you, that they start creating fear. There's all different directions it can go. And it can make it worse. And it can create more problems. And something that we've seen, which is a topic for a whole other podcast, is it can introduce these drama triangle dynamics where people try to be the rescuer and then someone's the victim and then they're looking for someone to blame. And it's just like a spiral of looking outside of ourselves for something to make it better. And the best kind of people to go to connect with when you're in your raw feelings are people who know how to hold space. And usually that is like a therapist, a coach, a somatic facilitator, someone who is trauma informed and understands the nuances of like, you don't need to have this go anywhere. That can be also like that, you know, that person, some of us have them, some of us don't, but that nurturing person that's like, just give me a hug. Like, we don't need to talk. Let's watch a movie. I don't need you to be any other way other than how you are. So I just wanted to share that for anyone who's out there. Like, be mindful of who you share energy with when you're vulnerable, because it can make a big difference in how you process.
Yeah, fully agree. One of our mottos from the beginning is you are your own healer. And that's something that, you know, we teach and we give people the tools, and then they can, you know, self-source, they can self-regulate, they can process their emotions, they can get their own answers from within. And it's one of the things that we love to empower people with all
and
the
then
way.
connect with like-minded people who are on that
Exactly.
wave with you.
Exactly.
Who get
That's where
it.
you find your community, and that's where you also manifest the things that you ultimately want, you know, from that place of being connected and living in alignment. So shout out to every single one of you who has made it to the end of this podcast. We want to say a big love to everyone that sent us messages asking about how we are and checking in with us around the fires, making sure that we're safe. We're really grateful for this community and everyone tuning into these episodes. We're super grateful that we're back and we're here and we can create this content. So if you are subscribed, then thank you. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe because it helps the channel out a lot. Sending you lots and lots of love, and thank you for joining us in this conversation. We hope you got some value out of it.
Let us know in the comments as well. What are you taking away from the conversation?
Yeah.
What are you grateful for? What are you reminding yourself of to not take for granted? That's been a huge lesson from the last few weeks, is don't take the blessings for granted.
Yeah, let us know in the comments below what you're taking away from this conversation. We'd love to hear.
All right.
Much
Big love, everyone.